Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't hear the alert, we are now recording. My name is Jules Epstein-Hebert, Director of Membership at Inclusiv. Looking forward to talking with you today a little bit about the CDFI Small Dollar Loan Grant Program and if it's right for your credit union. But you won't be hearing too much from me. You'll be hearing more from my colleague, Terry Ratigan, who's on the line. Before we get started, we're just going to wait a minute or two to allow some additional registrants to get signed in, and we'll get started in just a moment. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jules Epstein-Hebert, Program Director for Membership at Inclusiv. I'm very excited to have you all with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be discussing the 2021 opportunity at the CDFI Fund, which is the Small Dollar Loan Grant Program. And we'll be talking about whether this is an opportunity that might be right for your credit union. We are recording today's presentation, and we will share a copy of the recording with all registrants. We will also be sharing a copy of the slide deck. Finally, we'll be having some time for questions and answers at the end of this conversation. So if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A tool or the chat tool. And actually, if you have access to a microphone, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask your questions directly. But we will try to have an opportunity to answer everybody's questions today. But of course, if you have any follow-up questions or need further assistance, there will be contact information throughout this presentation to make sure we can get your questions answered offline. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Terry Ratigan, Senior Consultant with Inclusiv, to introduce the topic for today's conversation. Terry.
Thank you, Jules, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to our friends out west. As Jules said, we're going to be talking this afternoon about the Small Dollar Loan Program. And this is going to be a little bit different for those of you that have tuned into a lot of our webinars related to the Rapid Response Program, the financial assistance grants or technical assistance grants. This is going to be a little bit different because whereas normally we will explain the opportunity and then focus on tools and tips for completing the application, we're going to take a little bit of a step back today and actually focus on the question of whether or not this is a program, a good opportunity that's a good fit and worth the investment of time and resources for your credit union to do an application. But first, before we do that, I have the great pleasure, for those of you that haven't yet met our new CDFI Program Director, Crisel Martinez. I would like to introduce her. And Crisel, would you like to say a few words?
I sure will. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Crisel Martinez, and I am the new CDFI Program Director. I'm really happy to be on the call today to hear the conversation I'm coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I'm permanently located, and really happy to be on the Inclusiv team going forward. I've got extensive background in community development, working at a large credit union, as well as working in the education sector. So I'm glad to be on the call and hopefully to connect with people in the future. So thank you for taking a minute to introduce me, Terry.
Thank you, Chriselle. Many of you have noticed that Inclusiv has been growing by leaps and bounds over the last year or two, and we are just absolutely thrilled to have Chriselle joining us and building up our team as we expand our support for CDFIs and credit unions that are in the process of seeking or obtaining CDFI certification. So thank you, Chriselle. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to touch a little bit on capital opportunities for CDFIs and MDIs, as again, those of you that have joined our recent webinars, there are so many opportunities out there. I want to be able to put this small dollar loan program into the context of everything else that's happening. We'll talk a little bit about the application requirements, then the question of whether or not this is a good fit for your credit union, support available from Inclusiv, and then, as Jules mentioned at the top of the hour, we should have plenty of time if people have questions after that. So what are the opportunities that everybody has been hearing about? Many of you may have already participated in some of the opportunities that have come about already. There are a number of opportunities that require or have required CDFI certification, and those include the Rapid Response Program grants, the financial assistance grants, the small dollar loan program that we're talking about today, the COVID-19 recovery grants, which are still in development, and then for small CDFIs or for those that are not yet certified but eligible to be CDFIs, there are the technical assistance grants. And finally, outside of the CDFI fund itself, the US Treasury's $9 billion Emergency Capital Initiative program, that secondary capital loan. Now, just today, we're obviously going to be talking about the small dollar loan program, but just to put all of these opportunities in context, the RRP grants were $1.25 billion. That program closed at the beginning of April. Financial assistance grants were $170 million. That program also closed at the beginning of May. Technical assistance grants, that application period has passed. That was $10 million. The small dollar loan program is in, kind of on the scale of technical assistance grants. It's about $13.5 million available. The COVID-19 recovery grants that are still coming are $1.75 billion. And I think most of you are aware that $1.2 billion of that is specifically reserved for minority lending institutions such as MDI credit unions. And then the ECIP secondary capital program through Treasury, which is open now. And I believe the application period closes now in July, and that is $9 billion in available funding. So again, just to get the totality of where the small dollar lending program fits in with these other opportunities. So just to talk about the application requirements for a quick minute, I guess I can say a New York minute since I'm coming to you live from New York. The the usual disclaimer, bear in mind, we are not the CDFI fund. So we're speaking as Inclusiv, and I am, many of the opinions are strictly my own, but we're trying to give you the best objective technical advice and guidance that we can, but the official decisions and policies and procedures, obviously, that is up to the CDFI fund. All of their guidance is available on their website. If you haven't yet gone there, I urge you to go there. You can download. They have webinar presentations, the notice of funding available, all the application materials, detailed instructions. All of that is available at that website. Bear in mind the key deadlines. If this is something that you are planning to apply for, the very first essential deadline is coming up very soon at the end of this week. By May 28th, you have to submit your SF424 for this program through grants.gov. And then the application itself, you have more time to actually do that. That is not due until June 29th. And that is, as with other grant applications to the CDFI fund, that will be submitted through AMIS. To be eligible for this program, this is focused on installment loans up to a maximum of $2,500, loans that would have no prepayment penalty, and loans that are reportable to at least one credit reporting agency. Some of the program priorities that the CDFI fund has laid out, they want loans that have at least 90-day terms with underwriting that is based on the ability to pay, funding decisions after receipt of all documentation within 1 business day. So they want rapid decisions, rate reductions for automatic debit, and automatic savings component would be viewed favorably. And as with almost anything, any CDFI activity, including certification itself, access to financial education and credit counseling. All of those things would be program priorities. So they would look for the integration of all of those things in your activities. The application itself is not something to be undertaken lightly. If those of you that have dipped into the materials, I've certainly heard from a lot of credit unions and grant writers across the country that were a little bit surprised when the NOFA was released. It does include detailed narratives, and I just did a quick comparison in the length of the narratives required. I mean, how you count it exactly depends a little bit. There are always some optional or contingent narratives in both applications. But basically, the small dollar loan program includes about 50,000 characters worth of narrative, which could roughly translate to about 5,000 words. What was interesting to me is that is almost as long as a financial assistance application. So the key difference being that these questions are not the questions that are being asked in the FA application. So those of you that have been applying for FA for a number of years, even though it has extensive narratives, there are certain parts of the narratives that you are able to use or adapt or update from 1 year to the next. That's not so much the case for this application. You would be looking at writing a lot of these narratives from scratch. There are also detailed data charts. We're all used to kind of the financial data charts, which are part of all CDFI applications, which were largely almost entirely the same from the RRP applications, the FA applications, and the technical assistance applications. The small dollar loan programs they include some new charts specifically for your activities, and include historic activities and projected activities in small dollar lending. Also detailed questions on policies related to your small dollar lending practices, staffing, and so on. Which brings me to the question of should you apply? Again, this is the context that we started with a few minutes ago, looking at these 4 CDFI fund grant opportunities that are either recently closed or the one that is currently open. So, based on current experience, I'm looking at these programs in terms of the level of effort to do an application, the cost of doing an application. And when I say cost, I'm not just talking about if you hire a grant writer. Many credit unions are doing all their applications themselves. That doesn't mean there's not a cost involved. So when I talk about cost of doing an application, that's a combination. And even if you do hire a grant writer, there are costs in addition to the work that the grant writer is doing, because there is still work that staff has to do. The minimum amount of the grant that you might be eligible for if you win, and the maximum amount of a grant. So let's start with RRP, which I think everyone can agree was the smallest level of effort, the most minimal level of effort ever required for a CDFI grant application. The cost of doing an application, and again, we heard some consulting costs and the amount of staff time, we estimated at between about $1,500 to $4,500. As members of Inclusiv, CDFIs received about 80 to 90% of the data that was required to fill out that application at no cost. So the cost of doing an RRP application, the level of effort really was about as small as it can be. For first-time applicants, the biggest hurdles actually tended to be the technical hurdles of making sure you were registered on sam.gov, getting your SF424 submitted, and all of those things that when you're doing it for the first time can be significantly more complicated. For experienced CDFI applicants, this was about as easy as it could ever be. And for that level of effort, the minimum grant, if you do get an RRP grant, was $200,000. The maximum grant amount, you could apply for up to $5 million. We're expecting the maximum grant might be closer to about 1.6 million when it comes out. Technical assistance grants are a little bit more effort, and there are narratives required of the technical assistance grants. There are financial projections that are required for technical assistance grants, although they are not tied to your performance goals and measures. So they're in a sense lower stakes to your financial projections for TA grants. We estimate the level of effort at between about $3,500 to $7,500. Minimum grant amount is $10,000, but most grant recipients are getting closer to the maximum TA award of about $125,000. Financial assistance grants are significantly more work. And those of you that have experience doing FA grants know that from firsthand experience. Cost of doing FA grants, a little higher again, or a lot higher, kind of in the range of $10,000 to $25,000 to do a full application, much more extensive narratives, more, there's the same financial projections as are required in the TA grants, except they are much more consequential because they are frequently tied directly to the performance goals and measures that you would be accountable for if you get your FA grant. So that's a more serious undertaking. The minimum grant, if you succeed for FA, is $125,000. The maximum estimated grant in this last round is $700,000. So it's more work, but your what you might get for it is also, a little bit higher. Small dollar loan grants. Now for this, I've actually estimated the level of effort as higher than FA grants because it is a wholly new application. Because applicants are not able to take advantage of any past experience doing FA grant writing. So for that reason, and as a totally new application, understanding, everything from reading the guidance, understanding the guidance, crafting the narratives, putting together the data for the charts, I estimated it being about 20% more intensive than doing a financial assistance application. The minimum grant that's available for small dollar loan program is $30,000. The maximum grant is capped at $500,000, but bear in mind that the total fund is $13.5 million, which means if the CDFI fund decides to give maximum grants, there would only be 27 of those grants available. Tied to the level of effort is the chance of success. With RRP, we are estimating that probably about 80% of applicants, and maybe even higher, are going to be successful with their RRP applications. TA grants are even higher. TA grants are non-competitive, as RRP applications are non-competitive. So those would also be, at least 90%. Financial assistance grants, the CDFI fund, their benchmark is to have a success rate of about 60% for FA applications. And for small dollar loan programs, frankly, we really don't know what the success rate will be. It's going to depend a lot on the number of applicants. And remember, these applicants are not just credit unions. There are CDFI loan funds that specialize almost exclusively in small dollar lending. And I would be surprised if they're not applying for this program. Like I said, if we get, this year, I think there were about 600 FA and TA applicants. Last year, I think there were just under 400, about 377 FA grant applications with about a 60% success rate. If there were an equal number, 400 SDL applications, and they're giving anything close to maximum grants, the success rate is going to be very, very low. If the CDFI fund decides to do a larger number of smaller grants, that has other implications in terms of the return on the level of investment that the level of effort that applicants are putting in. So if you decide to apply, and I think you can see that, speaking for myself, I would encourage everybody to think long and hard before making a firm decision to apply. But if you do decide to apply, Inclusiv, of course, is capable of, and willing and able and, committed to providing the support we always provide for our members. In addition to giving this introductory webinar to help, think through whether or not this is the right thing to do. This is where you want to commit resources at this moment. Our TA and outreach team for small and MDIs, CDFIs can help with some of the essential steps to make sure that you are eligible by getting your SF424 submitted by this Friday, help you with your AMIS navigation, and provide general application support. And if you're interested in some of that support, feel free, please, contact Monica Copeland, and she can make sure that you get that kind of support. If you are interested in finding somebody to help you actually write your grant, the contact, as always, is our MC for this webinar, Jules Epstein Hebert, and you can send a message to Jules.
It's
and
me.
With that, Jules, I think we can open it up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Terry, for giving us the layout, the lowdown, the download on the small dollar loan program, and also comparing it, putting it into context of the sort of wider landscape of CDFI available resources. Now, we have plenty of time for your questions, your concerns, your comments. So please feel free to use the Q&A tool, or to use the chat tool, or raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And it looks like we've already received at least one question, so I'm going to start there, Terry. And as the rest of folks think of their questions or concerns. So the first question is, if a credit union has already submitted a CDFI application in 2021 for ESIP, RRP, technical assistance, financial assistance, etc., will they still have to update their grants.gov by May 28th? Is it specific to the small dollar loan program, or just to CDFI applications in general?
Yeah, good question. Anytime you're looking at applying for a CDFI fund grant, it's a good idea to log into all of your, check your status on sam.gov, make sure that your registration is active. Check your login for grants.gov. It's not just your login for grants.gov. If you are applying for the small dollar loan program, you actually have to submit your SF424, and it is a different SF424 for every grant program. So it doesn't matter if you submitted a 424 for FA or TA, you still need to submit the specific SF424 for this particular program by this Friday. Your accounts, if you applied for FA or TA, I would assume your accounts are fine, you're in good shape, but you do need to submit that form, and there are instructions in the application instructions on exactly how to fill out the SF424. And again, if you have questions on your SF424 submission, that's what we're here to help with.
Thank you, Terry. Follow-up question. This is actually related to RRP. Is there any word on when the RRP grants will be announced? The awardees will be announced.
Jules, you might want to take that one.
It's soon, right?
There are rumors. We don't know.
Right.
I had my money on July, but we've actually heard that it's possible it could be coming much sooner than that. But there's nothing official.
Yeah, it's always tricky. Some indications are, or I guess we've heard rumors that it may be announced by the end of this month, but that remains to be seen. So suffice to say, the RRP awardees will be announced between the end of this week and mid-July, I'm sure.
I should actually note, and this might have an impact on the CDFI fund's ability to announce RRP grants. But it came to our attention that sam.gov is having some technical issues themselves right now. And if that's the case, that might slow down the CDFI fund's ability to do that final stage of due diligence before announcing the award. So if that continues for a few days, there are, in any federal program, there are a lot of moving parts. So even if they intended to make the announcement this week, it's always possible that something prevents them from doing so.
Yes, we haven't, that would not be unprecedented.
Yes.
So this is a question on applying. If a CDFI already applied to other grant programs, RRP, TA, or FA, as well as the capital program, the Emergency Capital Investment Program, or ESIP, are they still eligible to apply for the small dollar lending program?
Yes. Yeah. If you meet the other eligibility requirements for the program.
Yeah. For a credit union, what would be the most likely eligible uses of small dollar loan funds?
The most likely would be loan loss reserves. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, and that would allow you to take on a little bit more risk in your lending, which may allow you, if done correctly and targeted, to increase your lending to CDFI target markets. If a CDFI partners with a FIDI, is it only as a referral network and not a traditional partner? Only the CDFI can utilize the grant funds for loan loss, not the partner, correct? That is correct. The CDFI funds the CDFI fund funds the CDFI institution. Though, of course, money, as I always remind folks, is fungible. A CDFI grant can allow you to free up dollars elsewhere in your budget to work with a partner. So that was most of the questions that we've had. One just came in. Scott asks, the RRP is flexible enough, and this is back to the RRP, that if awarded, we could use it towards the same purposes as the small dollar loan program. Yes. Of all the awards that we talked about, of all the opportunities that we talked about today, the RRP was what you might say the most bang for your buck. It certainly is the highest in terms of award amount potentially, the least amount of effort in terms of putting together the application, and the most amount of flexibility in terms of the use of the eligible uses of funds.
Yeah, because a small dollar loan also has both a capital and a technical assistance component, but so does RRP. RRP allows $200,000 or 15% of the loan of the grant of the award amount, whichever is greater, to be used for technical assistance purposes. So, it's flexible on both the capital side and on the TA side.
Thank you, Terry. Another question from Claire on CDFI partnerships and grants. If a CDFI partners with other CDFIs for this program, does the lead CDFI distribute funds to the other qualified CDFIs for loan loss, or how does the multiple CDFI partnership work?
I am not sure how to answer that question. I'm just reading it again.
So my question is why you would need to partner with other CDFIs for this. What the benefit would be to the awarded institution.
Right. And again, bearing in mind that you're probably talking about very limited amount of funding.
Yeah. And for credit unions to keep in mind that once you're awarded a grant, once it's added to your balance sheet, it is considered expended. Isn't that correct, Terry?
From the CDFI fund standpoint, yes.
From the CDFI fund standpoint. So when we talk about expending the funds and concern around whether we're able to expend the funds in a given period of time, once it's added to your balance sheet, it's considered expended for the purposes of CDFI fund grant reporting. I'm just checking. I apologize, Judy. I missed your question in the chat. If we received a grant last fall for a small loan program initiative, how would this work in conjunction with this grant initiative?
It's not clear whether that, I'm assuming that other grant was from a non-CDFI fund source. But it would again be part of the track record. If you were applying for this fund, it would be part of what you were describing in your initiative. Yes, it was. I see. It was a grant. But what the CDFI fund is always like, for all of their grant programs, they're looking at your financial institution as an ongoing entity with, varied sources of funding. And if you can imagine, I mean, we are depositories, so that's the way we see the world. But if you received one grant for your small dollar loan program, imagine what a loan fund has received if that's all they do is small dollar loans. They've got many, many grants to support their small dollar lending activity. So that's not an extraordinary, that's just part of their business model. So, to me, there's nothing, that would either impinge on your ability to apply, and nothing that kind of requires some interaction between those two grant programs, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Terry. And also thank you to our colleague, Jen Thompson, for sharing some additional information about small dollar loan program use of funds and the maximum award amount. And just a reminder that if all the awardees received the maximum amount, there would be less than 30 awardees. Is that correct, Terry?
Yeah, 27 if my math is correct.
So yeah, relatively competitive. I thought I saw a hand raised, but it looked like it went down. Oh, apologies. This message only went to panelists. I'm just going to copy and paste it. Thank you, Jen, for clarifying. Sometimes I can't. I don't notice that. So I'm just going to paste that for everybody's edification.
There is a great. There's a question about the SF424.
Great. I love questions about the SF424. Let me just switch back over. Apologies. Oh, the SF424 is, what is it? It's the standard form 424. It is required for applying for any CDFI fund grants, and I believe any federal grants through grants.gov. You would have to have your grants.gov account set up in order to submit your SF424. In order to set up your grants.gov account, you need to have your sam.gov registration up to date. There's information under expertise on the Inclusiv website, under expertise under CDFI services. And I can actually include a link to this in the follow-up email for you all. But we have a video library at the bottom of our CDFI resources page that shows you how to get your grants.gov set up, your sam.gov set up, AMIS set up. So I encourage you to check that out. The standard form 424 is due on the 28th. That's Friday. If you want to apply for this grant program, you need to submit your form. And there are a couple pieces to that by the end of the day on this Friday.
Yeah, we should add, if you have not yet, if this is your first time applying for a grant and you have not yet done those first steps that Jules talked about, setting up a sam.gov account typically takes about 10 business days. So if you've not yet started the process, this is probably not going to happen for you this time around, but just be aware you can register for sam.gov anytime. It's a one-time registration, and then you just have to kind of update your registration every year. There's no cost, but it is something that is required for any grant applications, any federal grant applications, including the CDFI fund. But if you haven't yet gone through all of those steps and have those registrations active, there really won't be enough time to do all of that and submit that funny little form, the SF424, by Friday.
And also, I would encourage all folks to go to the small dollar loan program page on the CDFI fund website, because that has all the tools and tips. It'll walk you through how to fill out the SF424. Excuse me, I muted myself. A lot of the fields on the SF424 have, they're asking what may seem like a general question, but it may be geared towards a non-regulated institution, or they're looking for a specific response in the context of CDFI fund activities. So it's important. Thank you, Terry, for pulling up what that page looks like. It's important to go to under CDFI fund website under programs and training, the small dollar loan program, and that will show there you'll be able to download the application manual and guides for answering some of these questions. And thank you, Jen, for sharing that link as well. So I believe those are all the questions, though I think we're getting some additional information in terms of the title of the SF424 instructions document and where to find it on that page. So again, we will be sharing the recording from today's program with you all hopefully tomorrow, as well as the slide deck. And of course, if you have any questions, we're here to answer it. But this is certainly a time-intensive application for a relatively small award by the standards of the CDFI fund. So without further ado, I guess I will wish you all a great afternoon. Thank you so much to Terry Ratigan. Thank you so much to Chriselle Martinez, our CDFI program director, excuse me. And of course to Jen Thompson for all the great advice that she shared in the comments. And most importantly, thank you to you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Hopefully this was helpful, and thank you for the great work you continue to do in providing services to our communities. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.